Right.
Welcome, everyone, to the first in our series of asynchronous interviews for COM 4603, Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements. This is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Associate Professor, Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. In our class, as I've specified before, we have several key educational goals that we're working toward. And they tie in with our larger tiers of emphasis in the major. And one of the top educational outcomes we're working on is gaining confidence as communicators. As always, we do that through various means: written, oral, and digital communication skill building. And in this course, we're working on strategic interviewing skills, but also our digital skills and question writing skills, right? All the things that go into producing and executing a quality interview. And so each week we have a special guest. And in week one, we are joined by Corey Fuller, who is a faculty member at Oklahoma Baptist University, happens to be the chair or division chair or something like that. He can correct me, of the graphic design and art program. Probably said all of that backwards now, but that's okay. Right. And Corey has a background in graphic design and marketing, advertising, and that's a strong crossover with some of the themes we tackle in this course, but also in several of our classes in the major. Each of you have prepared video questions, and thank you all for your work on that, for our guest. And he has previewed them in advance, but we want to work through those questions right now and get a kind of a live feedback from him that will be digitally archived for you all to assess later and use toward not only to just gain information, right? This is an educational journey we're all on, but also be able to use that for the assessment paper that we have toward the end of the class. So with all of that lead in, Corey, thank you very much for taking some time out of your summer schedule to join us.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
All right, we're using the UCU software for this interview series this time. We're kind of shifting away from Google Hangouts, not by choice, but that's okay. And in doing that, what I want to do is I should be able to synchronize these student questions for you and if any of the guests are joining us for observation. And let's see here. Want to let me share that. Like to show this entire screen. Okay. There we go.
There we go.
I was I was pushing things too fast. Okay, let me click over to our course D2L page. And I just want to run through some of the questions here. Students did, in case we get a little overtimeage with you, did have a kind of two-part question set up, but we'll work through one at a time and see if we have time to kind of go back and get some of those later questions. So let's start, if you don't mind, Corey, with a question from Rosalind, or perhaps before we jump to those, would you like to, is there any kind of short bio or background information you want to add to the content I've already set up for us? Is there anything else we should know about you that's not covered on your website?
I can just give you a quick bio. I grew up in Hinton, Oklahoma, which is in western Oklahoma. I attended Southwestern Oklahoma State with Professor Castleberry, and we were good friends at that time and still are. And I majored in graphic design at SWASU and really had intentions of going into ministry. And I had a chance to have a short stint at a church as a youth minister and decided that that wasn't quite for me. Youth have actual problems, and it's not just planning pizza parties and lock-ins. It was work, and so I was really scratching my head as to direction after I graduated college, and decided to pursue more education. And I went and got an MFA at UCO in Edmond, and I actually, just to be completely transparent here, I dropped out of that program and did some soul searching. I decided I really wanted to teach at the college level, and that's why I went back and finished the MFA. While I was doing that, I was also working at Legacy Bank, which is I think it's like the 10th largest bank in Oklahoma. So it's, I guess, a moderately sized bank, and mostly in the southwestern part of the state, family owned and operated. And I did training videos, TV commercials, graphic design, so brochures, websites, all of those things while I was in school. And luckily I had a wife that helped me finish school financially, and also just time wise. And I was able to quit my job at the bank to go full time in my last few credits at UCO, and ended up writing a thesis on church branding and marketing. And I've always been interested in the intersection of faith and design and marketing. And so that's really what it was about, is looking at how churches brand themselves. And I think I got so tired of it, I haven't wanted to go back and revisit it. But I think now, 10 years out from that degree, I'm just now ready to get back into that idea of the way that churches market themselves. I teach now at Oklahoma Baptist University. I've been here for 10 years. It's a Christian, distinctively Christian school, liberal arts school, and so we try to make people very well-rounded. They have to take a lot of history and literature in addition to their specific training in graphic design, and so that's the context that I find myself in today. So thank you for allowing me to speak to the class today.
Absolutely. And in case anyone missed that, Ryan, that there are these tenets of a liberal arts education, and it's about giving you a broad skill set. I know it's, the foundational knowledge of it, giving us a broad skill set with which we can apply in numerous, if not innumerable situations. And that we buy into that heavily. It's a big component of the communication studies program, a reason this works so well to kind of cross the aisle and have you in sharing with us. So let's hear from some of our students. However, are you, just to double check, Corey, are you able to see my screen below?
Yeah, I see Rosalind there.
Mm-hmm. You see what?
I see Rosalind.
Okay, good. Because I was just seeing the like circly things when I shifted back over. Let's hear from Rosalind and give our students that opportunity to have their voice heard and engage the conversation here.
Hi, my name is Rosalind Ben, and I'm enrolled at Mid-America Christian University. Currently, I'm in the course entitled Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements, which is being taught by Professor Castleberry. He's provided us with the privilege and opportunity to interview Mr. Corey Fuller, who is the Associate Professor of Graphic Design and Chair of the Division of Art and Design at Oklahoma Baptist University. Hi, Professor Fuller. How are you today? I have a couple of questions for you. My first question is, based on your employment history, what was one of the most significant motivators that caused you to end up in your current position?
All right, so you just may have covered that a touch, but maybe can you speak to your motivation? How much drive does someone have to be to do a career shift like that?
Well, so what drove me to get into teaching, I guess, is the question, because that's where I found myself, and I imagine I'll stay in this career for the rest of my career, the rest of my time. This is probably not the best answer, but during my undergraduate education, I just felt like it was lacking in some ways, and I don't want to speak ill of my alma mater. I had an overall great experience there. We had a lot of turnover in the department while I was there, and so just as soon as you would meet someone and form a relationship and a bond with that professor, they would go elsewhere. And I think I was just kind of the guinea pig that was there at the wrong time. And I had some good instruction, but it was a tumultuous time in the department. And I felt like in some ways there were some gaps in my education. And I think part of my drive to go on to grad school was just to learn more about graphic design. And I think I received a good undergraduate education overall, but my MFA was definitely a lot more fine-tuned and honed in on the design process. So that's maybe what got me into it. I will say though, after teaching for 10 years, it is difficult, and students are paying a lot of money to hear what I have to say, and that's a little bit intimidating. Um, but what I'm trying to share with them is my life experience, and so it was really helpful for me that I got to work at the bank, and now I'm teaching, and so I think I hope at least they see that I have a little bit of credibility in how I talk about the industry. It's not strictly theoretical; it's practice based.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can testify to that as well, having gone through those. But this interview is not about me, and they can ask me those questions anytime they want. They just choose not to. Let's because Rosalind gave us such a setup. Let's go ahead and finish out what she's
Okay.
here.
My second question is, do you have plans to expand your presence in the current cultural movement of social media? And if your answer is yes, how will you do it? Thank you for your time. I appreciate the privilege and opportunity to interview you today.
All right, and so just to kind of contextualize that and tie it back, we are we were studying social media in conversation with interviewing, and thus the kind of the convergence between these two themes is networking. All right, and so what does it look like in a digital age? But what role does social media play? Right, I think Rosalind's ultimately asking, and how could you incorporate, or how do you incorporate it in what you do?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll first say I'm not an expert on social media. So if you look at my Twitter following, it's like next to nothing. So take all this with a grain of salt. There is a book that I would recommend to your class, especially if they're Christians. It's called Disruptive Witness by Alan Noble. He's a professor here, and he's talking about how we navigate this, not just really as Christians, but as human beings. And we wake up in the mornings, the first thing we look at is our phone. So we're tuned in to what's happening in the world and what Donald Trump has said before we even talk to our spouses in the mornings or our kids. So it's just a really different reality we find ourselves in. My wife was making fun of me the other day because I have like the maximum amount of Instagram accounts. I think you can have 5. And so I'm constantly toggling. I have my personal one, which is pictures of my girls and food I eat. And then I've got my portfolio. I manage my churches. I have this journal that I work on with Garrett called Ink and Letters. I have, let's see, what's the other one? Oh, our department here at OBU. And so it's strange to think of ourselves in terms of brand, but we really have to wear a lot of different hats. And so I'll put on my Ink and Letters brand, and then I'll put on my my OBU brand. And I think we need to be mindful of our personal presence. I took some students to New York a couple of years ago, and we were right there on Madison Avenue in a nice size ad agency, and they were talking about the hiring process, and I was asking questions about portfolio and all this. And he said, that's important. He said, but we just actually unhired someone. We had hired them, and we decided to not hire them right early in the game. It wasn't really a firing. It was just a call to say, like, we've decided to go a different direction because of this person's social media content. It was just vile, hateful kinds of things. The guy apparently had a good portfolio, seemed nice in an interview, and they started digging a little bit and found out that that wasn't the full story. So I think, like, in a personal sense, we need to be careful. I'm not asking anyone to shirk their constitutional rights for free speech or anything, but we need to be mindful of how we communicate, how that's going to be interpreted on the flip side. And teaching at OBU, I mean, I'm not censored in any way, but I'm pretty mindful of what I say and how it will be taken by my students, by Oklahoma Baptists, by my provost, all of these things. So we've got to think about it.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and a connective tissue for us. So we touch on a lot of these ethical dilemmas in a course titled Digital Media Literacy. We offer one of our most frequently offered courses, and it is one of those things we encourage with our students. It's led to a kind of advent of when you're in that higher education, when you're in academia, and if you're an active, say, writer, there are these sets of linguistics that we use. There's sort of scholarly language for assigning meaning to things, and then that has its own value. And I'm talking more to students than Corey, who understands this. But there's a term that's grown out of the development of this particular major. We refer to it as a positive digital footprint, and one of the things we're working on for our students is to develop that positive digital footprint to help replace that potential negative digital footprint, or maybe the absence of any footprint online. And that's not unhealthy, but if we're going into fields professionally otherwise that involve or engage media in some way, we need some sort of footing, right? If you don't have footing, you're not going to stabilize. Let's jump over to a different student. Destiny has a question for us. All right.
Hello, my name is Destiny Jackson, and I just have 3 questions for you. So my first question is, how has your degree in art and graphic design helped you in advertising? My second question is, how did you get into videography, and how have you used videography in advertising?
Okay, let's pause it there for a second and kind of take this a little bit at a time. Do you remember question 1?
I was jotting down some notes.
Okay.
I think her first question was, how have I used art and design in advertising?
Graphic design in advertising, sure.
Yeah. So just to kind of go back to my past, I mean, I grew up drawing and sketching, and I've always loved to do that. While my friends were drawing superheroes and comic book characters and things, I always enjoyed working with type, drawing letter forms, making logos. Then I found out later that stuff has a term. It's graphic design. And so as soon as I discovered that term, I thought that's what I want to do. So I majored in that. And there's a really, and I could talk for an hour about this, but there's a really interesting relationship between art and design. So in our department, they're fairly fused together, and we all get along, and our colleagues are all on board with a fused idea of art and design. In other departments around the country, you'll find that those are very separate things. It can even be kind of quarrelsome. There's also the issue of what is art and what is advertising. And so if you have a film that has a ton of product placement in it, you start to question if it's artful or not, or if it's just a commercial that you're watching. So for my students, I try to get them to think, and I'm teaching designers, so they're maybe a little more pragmatic than artists, which isn't good or bad. Artists are just more expressive. I try to get them to think of their jobs not just as advertisers, but as problem solvers. And you'll hear me probably say that again in this interview, the idea of problem solving. So we're trying to create order out of chaos. We're trying to communicate clearly. Now, a question I always pose to my students is, if we're going from graphic design, we've been trained as idealistic graphic designers to make order out of chaos, and then we're going and working at an advertising agency that's cranking out ads that are vying for people's attention. This company's making ads. They're making ads. It's on the subway. It's on the turnpike, on the billboards. Then we're actually adding more chaos to the landscape, right? And I don't answer that question for them, but I want them to think about it, that sometimes by the very nature of our skill set, we may actually be undermining what we're really trying to do. Now, I don't tell my students to not work for advertising agencies. That they most definitely do, but what I tell them is, find an agency that you feel like aligns with your values. There's a company in Oklahoma City. They've been in the news, Ackerman McQueen. I've had several students work there and intern there. They did a lot of work for the NRA. That relationship has soured significantly. It's being litigated right now. But like let's say you're not on board with the NRA, and that's the cash cow for a certain agency. That doesn't make sense for you to go work for that agency. So you need to find a place, and I'm not saying good or bad, neutral, right? But you need to find a place if you're going to work in advertising as a designer that those messages resonate with you personally, or you're gonna bump up against all kinds of ethical quandaries. So that's the thing I'd say on that. On videography, videography was something that I just kind of fell into. I worked as an in-house designer rather than outsourcing everything to an agency. Legacy Bank does everything in-house, and so when I was there, we had a person for web, we had a person that was copywriting and doing a lot of our print things. We had a marketing director, and for whatever reason, I guess I was the most skilled or likely to work with video. So I did a lot of training videos. I actually worked with Garrett on a few of those. And we also did some TV ads that ran on our local CBS affiliate, KWTV. And they're not things I really talk about a whole lot because that was a long time ago. But it is something I could do. Again, I kind of miss nonlinear editing. I mean, it's fun to get in the editing bay and start cutting and but in my current context, we have other people that teach that a lot better than I do, and so I focus mainly on 2D graphic design, not so much on video. So sorry, that's not a great answer to that question.
Like Disney's earliest work, I believe many of those projects are in the vault.
Right, it's going to stay in the vault. Yeah.
Waiting for to be unleashed at an inconvenient time. You got me thinking about an interesting topic when you mention advertising, or rather when art crosses the line and becomes too much of advertising. I just read a headline last week, the week before, topical to this month, where someone was calling out a show, a TV series or streaming series, I guess to be more accurate. In Stranger Things, the title read something like this show as Stranger Things enough with the in-show advertising, or you've gone too far, right? As if to say it's jumped the shark because of too many product placements. But that's funny because I think what consumers are seeing, or I'm calling audiences consumers because it's one and the same, but what the audiences are picking up on are these labels that happen to be advertising for things that are still around. Whereas talking about the pop culture references, all of that has been embedded, or what Stuart Hall calls encoded, since the beginning. So the show has always been about that. But the 1980s was also a decade that's recognized as highly materialistic. So it makes narrative sense that it would become almost increasingly product focused, right? Because there was a kind of cultural paradigm shift taking place.
That makes sense. Well, and for me, it's actually distracting if you're watching a scene from a show in the 80s and they're drinking a cola and it says cola on
generic cans and stuff.
Drink a Coke.
Whereas we're impressed if they will get like the vintage can from the era. I think that was something that the TV series intentionally Mad Men did so well, was they were constantly guarding and shopping for authentic fashion looks and products and ad designs, specifically from not just the decade of the 1960s in America, but also like down to the year, right? I think only in the history of the show, only maybe 2 or 3 times did they have like an inaccurate product that was just a tiny bit off, or even a piece of background music soundtrack that was just a touch off in terms of its timeline. It was a very accurate run, and that's why it sort of would get bushels of awards. There was such a meticulous attention to detail there. Let's hear from our students again. Let's make sure their voice is being heard. We can come back and hit Destiny up, but let's in the meantime hear from Elizabeth. She's got some questioning here.
Hello everyone, my name is Liz Giles and this is Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements. This week we are speaking with Mr. Corey Fuller, who currently serves as Associate Professor of Graphic Design and Chair of the Division of Art and Design at Oklahoma Baptist University. My question to Mr. Fuller is, throughout your career, what is one thing you have learned that has stuck with you the most and helped you along the way?
All right, no pressure.
Hello, everyone.
Wow.
My name is...
One thing that you've learned that has stuck with you.
So, I mean, there are day-to-day things like keyboard shortcuts that are like abundantly helpful. But like as far as like taking like a grand view, I would say not burning your bridges. Because it seems like time and time again, I end up working with people that I've worked with in the past.
You're right.
Yeah, just not burning bridges. And I may seem calm and collected on video here. I can be a little short-tempered sometimes, and that's why you have family members and therapists and things, so you can vent when you get home from work. But sometimes I'm like, I'm done with this person, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But being cool and collected and taking a step back from things. Sometimes I'll actually write letters or draft emails in a Word document, and I'll save them somewhere, and I won't send them. And that can actually be rather cathartic. I don't know what the scope or the range of this video interview will be. I don't know if I may speak of someone that would watch this, and I don't know.
No. You bring up an important point here that I think is a valuable tool, and I don't regularly teach our media law and ethics course, nor do I teach our, I believe, writing for mass and social media course. I couldn't, but we try to diversify certain courses to folks that really have a passion and expertise for those areas. And in both of those courses, there should be this emphasis on communication ethics. And I think that it's always an important time to be able to pause and remind our students, especially students, but being students, just training for being, whatever the next level is. And we try to incorporate that, but sometimes students feel like a free form flow to email faculty or deans or whoever, like whatever's on their mind. Or occasionally I've heard stories of, let me just go ahead and just send it to the president. Like, let me send it straight to the top, which is outrageous to think about. But there is a way in which we want to collectively carry ourselves in those situations. If we want to be, I tell students when they fill out end of course evaluations in classes on ground, I say, now this is your opportunity. This is your platform to speak and be heard. But let me tell you how it will be received. And it's, if you're typing in all caps and everything is an exclamation point with, grammatical errors, they will be amusing, but it will not be sort of taken seriously. It will be considered, but not taken seriously necessarily.
Yeah.
We want to compose ourselves professionally. And so I'm tying this back to your story here. I think it's always important for us to recognize that when we get into these intense moments and periods throughout life, and where pressure is on and the stress is high, and you never want to send that first venting or ranting email that you draft. You need to sit on it. There is there's an adage of, like, many people say, go to bed, sleep on it, and come back in the next day, see how you feel before you send that back to the student or the coworker or whatever. And that's sound wisdom. So your idea of journaling and finding a cathartic outlet, that's good. That's important.
Yeah, and sometimes it ends there, and you never see that person again, but you never know. And there was a guy that I'm thinking of him right now. I mean, we were neighbors in college. We didn't have a great relationship. But it's funny, when he became a business professional, he changed a lot. I grew up a lot, and we've actually worked together. I've created some identity systems for his organization now. It's become like a really mature professional relationship that, probably would not have been possible beforehand. So just not burning those bridges. Everything's a networking opportunity, to be cliche, but it is.
not all of our students are looking to continue into higher education or careers there, but some are. And a funny takeaway, I don't know if it's a funny takeaway so much as a warning sign, is you will hear this repeated that, oh, it's a small field, or you think about the national scope of a discipline, and how there are thousands or hundreds of colleges and universities across the country, and it's easy to just you're just a number and get lost in that ocean. But you find yourself running across these individuals again and again, right? So if you're walking into a discipline, into a career field, you're going to see these folks. They're going to be out there in places. Other thing that I would comment on is, the onset of social media as our everyday norm.
Yeah.
We can't escape these people. In fact, here's, let's say we're at a point in terms of surveillance culture, and I'll refrain from Foucauldian remarks here, but we're at a point where I could be venting to Corey in person privately about someone, and my vocalization of that may activate them into my algorithms on social media. So all of a sudden, like, they're coming back into the circle without me actually, cyber stalking them or whatever. So
yeah.
We want to think of those things, and even don't be afraid to delete the harshest drafts you write of that, so you don't accidentally send.
Right? No. That's true. Yeah.
Let's hear from Yvandius Simone and see what Simone has for us.
Welcome to COM 4603 video discussion, the final draft interview questions. My name is Shiva Paris, and we are talking to the Associate Professor of Graphic Design, who also carries a chair of the Division of Art and Design at OBU. So my question would be, tell me about a time that your integrity and media ethics were challenged in dealing with copyrighted materials. How did you handle the situation in an ethical way?
All right. Do you have any stories of dealing with ethical issues or copyright decisions that needed to be made?
Well, I mean, to protect my own integrity, I could just tell student stories.
Yeah, of course.
Well, let me say a few things, just kind of like generally speaking. So, as artists and designers, we're constantly leveraging other people's intellectual property, right? So, I mean, as a designer, I'm using stock photography. Other people have shot that. I'm using typefaces other people have designed. Maybe I'm even sourcing an illustration from somebody. And I may just be an art director who just amasses all of this intellectual property into one composition and sends it on, but my name stays with it, What I tell my students, though, is that you have to, the line in the sand, I guess, for me is, don't pawn off somebody else's work as your own. That's where you get in big trouble. If you say, okay, I designed the typeface, I designed the photo, and you didn't, then you're in trouble. It's fine to use other people's work as long as they've allowed you to use it, but you just can't say, oh no, that's mine. So, I've taught for 10 years, and I've had some wonderful students. I've had some students, I won't say they're not wonderful, but they've made some poor choices. And 2 different occasions, actually 3 now. We had one last semester. Anyway, so I'll give people a town. So it's an actual town. They have to research it and come up with a professional sports team, logo, name, the whole deal.
I like this assignment.
And what happened was I came across, a couple in one particular semester. And I thought, not that it was too good for what I thought they were capable of. It just didn't seem right. When you do a drawing or you do a design, it has like a certain thumbprint on it. It has a DNA to it that other people can't achieve. And sure enough, unfortunately, my assumptions were confirmed when I went on the Google image search, which we faculty members have access to, just like the students do. I was able to find those logos that these students had taken and used. So those were difficult conversations. One student fessed up, said, yeah, I mean, you got me. I'm sorry. there was really no explanation, and he apologized. Another student couldn't quite wrap her mind around what was wrong with it, and she said, well, I changed it. I said, yeah, you changed it, but I mean, the underlying artwork is somebody else's, and you would have never created what you created without having that original art and that you borrowed. And so hopefully it was a learning experience. And that's one great thing about school is it's a pretty safe place to fail. You're not going to get fired. You're not going to get sued. I told a kid last semester, though, I said, if you put this out there, like on a jersey or on a hat, this other university that he had stolen the identity from is going to sue your pants off. And not only are you going to be fired, but you might have to pay in damages, especially if you're running the company. And so, I mean, that's serious business. So artists do what's called appropriation all the time. We're leveraging other people's work, but we have to make a new meaning out of it as an artist. Or we have to make sure we're managing the rights appropriately to utilize the work in our own work. And I mean, I've probably had some little breaches in my 20-year career as a designer. Lifting a few things off Google, thinking, oh, I don't think anybody will notice. And probably no one is going to notice. Mm-hmm. The part of it's like in your heart, like, does that feel right? But there is also the very real fear that you could be sued. And so, I mean, again, sounds cliche, but act with integrity so you can sleep at night and you'll be a much happier person. So,
I believe every course that we have, one of the first, subsections of the syllabus defines plagiarism for our students. It's a reality we face. It's an issue. It's something we must fully understand, and we want accountability there. It's important to us. But part of that, the most important aspect of that definition that we try to stress to students is that plagiarism can be intentional or it can be accidental. It's still plagiarism. Yeah. And but let's take scholarly writing. Sometimes we have students writing analysis essays, and I think an important reminder is it's not only okay and appropriate to share the others' work, the ideas others have had that come before you, but it's legitimizing, it's helping support. So I call it supporting evidence. Support your ideas, support your work. It's demonstrating you've done the groundwork, right? So those kinds of references pages, students get tired of hearing probably about that. Reminders about not just style, academic styles, but that the references are there, that we're being ridiculous about giving credit. But writing, just like graphic design, just like art, just like marketing, I mean, they each has its own style and art form to it.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can finish the question Simone was asking here and get the second part of this.
Then, could you describe a traditional Addy Awards ceremony, and how has that enhanced your career?
All right, we haven't talked about the Addies much, but the students are aware, having looked at your bio. Can you tell us a little bit about the Addies? What are they? What's your involvement been, and the question there?
Okay, yeah. So Addy is that's an award ceremony. It's put on by the American Advertising Federation, and that's obviously a national organization, and they have local chapters. And I've only attended the Oklahoma City chapter. I've never been to any other city's Addy Awards, but Oklahoma City, it's really impressive. The amount of quality work that comes out of this market. And I think a couple of years ago, they started including Tulsa and parts of North Texas into that Addy ceremony. So I've been fortunate to win a couple as a professional, and I will say it's even more rewarding when you have students win. And we don't win every year, but we like to put some work out there, and some years we do better than others. I think for the students especially, it's some validation of their hard work, and it's a good thing to put on a resume. And I always tell my students, when they're looking for, they always ask, well, where do I apply for jobs? Well, the Addies, they actually put out a book, after the awards, and it says, this firm and this agency, they won, gold or silver or whatever. visit those websites, call those places, send your resumes to those organizations. Doesn't mean you're going to get a job right out of college at one of those top tier organizations. But you gotta start somewhere. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really affirming. Of course, the years that you don't win, you always say, well, they don't know anything. So, which I've had those. I will say the first few times I entered, I don't think I ever won anything. But then when I did eventually win one as a professional, it was a really good feeling. So yeah.
Federation is rigged.
What's that?
This federation is rigged.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's one of those deals, like, just to be transparent, you're paying them, like, you're paying them to give you an award in a sense, but you're paying for the judges, and you're paying for their expertise to have their eyes on your work, and then you can go to the gala, and it's pretty cool. It's an exciting time.
Okay, now from my time in advertising, I became very familiar with sort of annual campaigns like the Best in OKC or similar things, and so I come at it from the understanding that you could win in that popular vote, right? They would have a voting season for top barbecue restaurant or whatever, and then but then you would have to pay to get the ad in the Gazette or the Look at OKC magazine to say you are the best in whatever. Is that what you're describing here? That you only pay to attend the event, or you're
No, what I'm saying is you pay to enter your work so that you be associated with each piece, and that's just that's paying for the processing and for the judges to look at the work and everything. So no, it's not. I probably shouldn't have even brought that up. It's not like a buying your way in. But I do remember there were certain contests that we're going to put our ballot in our publication, and you could literally like buy 100 of those publications and have your friends fill out like, this is the best eye doctor and Sean or whatever. And like, all of a sudden, I can't believe it. We won.
I won't name companies that I worked for that did that, but I'm familiar that is a practice that some people do.
It happens. It happens.
I may or may not have been asked to drive around town buying up daily Oklahomans to then bring back to the HQ so that people could have their ballot.
No, it happens.
So submit it or whatever, but but that's a more. It's a fun spin on gerrymandering. Let's leave it at that. Which I don't consider gerrymandering fun at all. So let's take in a question. Here's Khalil. Khalil's got some questions for us. And I'm noticing before we talk, you're getting lots of name drops, Corey. So congratulations.
I know.
We're enhancing your online profile and personal branding through all these repeated introductions. I failed to cue these up.
It's okay.
Creating social media presence and cultural movements. And today I'll be directing some questions to Mr. Corey Fuller. And my first question of the day is, what is the difference between graphic design, creative design, and the content creator?
All right, so we've got some competing definitions. Can you help us understand the difference between these?
Okay, so graphic designer, and then he said creative designer, and then the content creator, I think.
Content creator, which is a buzzword. It's a buzzword we even use, right? It's but these are just that's part of information literacy, right? Between disciplines, but in the working world, understanding the nature of the differences makes us more confident about, should I apply for this job or not?
Yeah. So I think in the hard sciences they do a much better job of identifying things. So they'll say this is photosynthesis, and you don't get to invent your new word for photosynthesis. Like, that's the established word for that process. But in graphic design and creative industries, we tend to like sort of invent words. So graphic design as a term came about in the 20th century, And there's a guy named Wiggins that coined that phrase, and it speaks to two things. So it's graphic, so it's visual, but it's also design, so it's problem solving oriented. So you're solving a problem visually. There are other terms that get thrown out, like commercial art, which I hate that term. But if you majored in graphic design, like 30, 40, 50 years ago, it might have been called commercial art. In my mind, what that does, though, it kind of diminishes the whole field and just says, okay, this is artwork employed for capitalism. Like, this is art that's meant to make money. You'll hear visual communication a lot, which I don't think is a bad term. I think OU and Norman uses visual communication. Most programs have settled on graphic design. And then you say creative design. So, I mean, in my mind, creativity should be applied to all of it. You hear the word just creative used, like I am a creative. I don't, if somebody has that on their business card, I don't like quibble with it, but I sometimes wonder, aren't we all creative to some degree? But I'm the creative, I'm a creative. So,
about others, not myself.
Yeah.
As a creative, I creatively disagree. No.
And then content creator. So, content is so essential. So I think a lot of people imagine hiring me as a graphic designer, and they say, well, I want you to do our website, and I'm just going to manifest this beautiful website. Well, I can design it, but I have to have the content. And so you have to have someone generating good content. So graphic designers should always work with good copywriters that can generate the good content that's going to resonate with the audience. A lot of times that's written from the business's perspective. But what you really have to do as a content creator is like flip the table a little bit and think about, okay, people that are coming to our company, what are their questions? What do they need? What terms are they going to be searching for to find an entity like ours? And I've done work for companies, being in Oklahoma, I've done several things for energy companies. And like when we started, I have no idea what it is that they do, like no earthly concept. And so I have to do a lot of research. And so that's one thing, I guess, a teachable moment in all of this. It's a good question. I think the big takeaway for me would be, regardless of what field you want to work in, if you want to be in education or financial sector or energy, you've got to do a lot of research and learn what it is that you're trying to communicate, because you will have to communicate things that you don't understand natively, and you've got to learn how to do that. And so, I mean, a graphic designer ends up being a liaison or a mediator between the company and the public or the consumers that are out there. And consumers are very savvy. They're so savvy these days. It's kind of scary. So you have to be careful about not being patronizing or employing stereotypes, because people can see right through that stuff now. So
I love the descriptive language that you're providing us in these areas of expertise that you have. There, I see, and I hope the students are picking up on so much crossover between those ideas, that field and ours. I mean, they both fall within humanities. That's why we reached out to connect with you. But this idea of a mediator, this is exactly the kind of role many of you will move on to, and it's important to understand that. We will use terms like gatekeeper. I mean, you're a gatekeeper of information. You could be you're a liaison between people that have power and audiences or consumers that have a role to play, but you have to help map that out to connect these parties. And you also mentioned what you described was the collaborative process. You said you may need to, as a content creator, get with the writers, et cetera. But the writers are also content creators, and be open to that collaborative exchange. It's going to serve you well, whether you're in a strictly kind of narrow PR position, let's say for a hospital, or a traditional type of organization, or something broader where you're a catch-all employee. And so many more of the roles today, the positions today, are catch-all positions. Let's see here. Let's take a question from Dana. All right, and we'll hear from Dana here.
Hello, Dana Taylor here for week 1 interview for COM 4603. And my first question is, which project have you worked on or created that you feel is the best you've ever done, and why?
No pressure there.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing I got to listen to the questions beforehand, so I kind of thought about it. Otherwise, I'd just be stammering. So there was a project that I did for Legacy Bank. This was several years ago. We put a location in at 15th and Bryant, and the whole concept with that development was it was going to look like an old downtown. And a lot of people said that location for the bank wouldn't work because it wasn't going to have a drive-through. But we wanted to make it very personal. Like this is a bank you still walk into. People maybe greet you by your name, that kind of idea. And as far as I know, it's been pretty successful despite not having a drive-through. But what we did with the teller stations at that bank, we had one that was kind of geared towards 1902, which was the founding year of the bank. And then we had another teller station that was mid-century modern in its styling because there was a transition in leadership in the bank in 1954 when Mr. Carmack bought it. And then the next teller station was the teller station kind of the future. And it was just really clean, just kind of amorphous. Like you weren't even sure like what it was. It was just like this station. And you know, truth be told, the teller station of the future is like this thing right here, right? It's not in a bank store, but you know, we didn't maybe know that so much then. So
no sleeves, right?
What's that?
The future station. It had a mohawk and
and a hoverboard. Yeah, and but anyway, so I guess my part that I played in this was creating a mural that went behind those teller stations, capitalizing on the styles of each of those periods. So 1902, 1954, and kind of present day to the future. And so we ordered clocks that mirrored those different styles. That work was probably some of the biggest stuff, like scale-wise, that I've ever done. And so we had the mural that I created printed on a wallpaper substrate and then installed by a wallpaper hanger, and then put a huge border around it. It was, I don't know, probably 30 feet wide by 10 feet high or something. Anyway, so you know, not to toot my own horn too much, but it did end up winning an Addy Award, which was kind of cool. So I mean, that was kind of some nice validation for how that project came together. And the other cool thing was it was so multifaceted. You know, we worked with interior designers, architects. My dad, I worked with him a lot on that project. He was kind of the lead on all that, and so it was a really cool collaborative kind of thing. And that's probably the thing I'm most proud of.
Excellent. Let's hear what else Dana has in store.
Secondly, what trends do you see in graphic design, and where do you think the field is headed? And as a follow-up.
Oh, hold on. Trends in graphic design?
Trends in graphic design, yeah.
Sure.
So I teach a history of graphic design course here at OBU, and sometimes I'll say that, and people say, "Oh, there's a history." I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, when people think graphic design, they think, you know, recent, like, oh, that started when the Macintosh came out, you know, and people were doing stuff with a graphical user interface. And that's true, that all happened, but people were doing graphic design before that, and we end up appropriating a lot of what has traditionally been art history. So, I mean, a lot of times movements and trends are aesthetic, you know, it's just kind of like nonsensical. You don't even know like why this color is popular at this time, but a lot of times it's rooted in a certain technology. So like wood type poster style, which is like when you see a wanted poster, it's got that kind of tarnished wooden type, you know, real ornamental lettering and things. That came out of a time when people were moving their printing presses out west, and so they started making type out of wood instead of out of metal, you know. And so I won't give you too long of a history lesson and all that. So when we look at trends, sometimes those are going to be driven by the technologies that we have at our disposal. Sometimes it's a reaction to the technology we have at our disposal. And sometimes, who knows? Like, I don't know why, fuchsia is going to be the next hot color, or turquoise or whatever it may be. Who knows? I think, so to answer her question, some of the trends that we see right now, hand lettering is super popular right now. And I think the reason is I keep waiting for it to die and it just won't die. But anyway, I think it's a reaction of what's going on with the computer, because it's, so clean and digital and ethereal on the computer. Everything's perfect. But if you do something with your hand, it's not going to be perfect. It has a personal style to it. You see a lot happening with glitch artwork, and that's entered into graphic design. So actually making mistakes like scanning, rescanning, photocopying, rescanning, running it through some kind of filter on your computer to purposefully mess it up, like changing the file format a bunch of different times and optimizing it, re-optimizing it, ruining it. So those are some of the trends that I think are sort of in a way like a digital backlash. Now, of course, we're still publishing all this on Instagram to show our friends, but I think you're seeing some degree of reaction to the digital binary code that has completely consumed the design world.
Let's hear the final part of that.
Okay.
With advancements in technology, everyone thinks they can do their own graphic design. So how will the field combat this trend? Thank you.
Oh, okay. Talk to us a little bit about that sort of the separation between those that believe they can. We talk about this all the time when we do exercises like making podcasts, but it translates over to graphic design as well. Everyone believes they're a photographer now, but what does that gap look like in the graphic design world, and how do you shield off, protect your own, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I was at an AIGA meeting a while back. This was American Institute of Graphic Artists, and they were talking about the issue: should graphic designers have some kind of certification or test that they take? In other industries, you have to be certified to practice. I definitely fell on the side that we should not have any kind of certification. I always tell my students, you cannot kill anyone with graphic design. Like, a doctor can kill someone if they're bad at what they do, but unless you make like a really illegible high voltage sign or something, it's like chances are very slim you're going to kill somebody. So what I always tell people is like we have the democratization of technology now, all this, prosumer technology. So it's like professional, but it's consumer accessible. What still happens though is you still have a winnowing of the good and the bad. Like, it's still going to happen. So just because the technology is ubiquitous doesn't mean everyone's a graphic designer or a good graphic designer. And I mean, I shouldn't say this because I'm teaching in this field and I want you to come to school and learn and all that, but so much of it could be self-taught, especially these days with the technology where it's at and with YouTube and things like that. But I mean,
but not with Google Hangouts, which doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. And I know some really good graphic designers without any formal training. Those people are super rare, though. I think we always hold those people up on a pedestal and say, "Oh, he never went to college, or she never did any school, or whatever." But I still think, like I say, school is a really safe place to fail. And it's a place to learn and have things modeled for you, and which is getting outside the question. But I still think just naturally, organically, there is a winnowing process that occurs between the good and the bad in the design field. So I don't worry too much that the technology to create graphic design is so accessible.
Just because someone can do it for free doesn't mean you can't make a living doing it. Something like that. Yeah. Let's hear from Erin.
Hello, my name is Erin Manuel, and my first interview question is, how did you apply a graphic design degree to the day-to-day duties for Legacy Bank? My second question is, tell us about the work that has earned you the Addy's Award. And my third question is, you describe graphic designers as a visual, creative problem solvers. Tell me about a time when you had to solve some graphic design problems and what they were.
Okay, I let that kind of play through. You've spoken to the first two a little bit, although feel free to add a different story. But this last part is a kind of demonstrate a time you've applied that problem solving using graphic design work.
Yeah. So one thing I always try to impart to my students, and I ripped this quote off of a guy named David Carson, but he says that legibility does not equal communication. And what he means by that is just because like a sign is legible, like you said it in 72-point Helvetica and people can read it, that doesn't really mean it communicates. And so I think what I'm trying to do as a professional designer and what I'm trying to get my students to do is not just make something that's legible, that's clear, but it's also done creatively. And I had to design a book cover for a colleague recently, and his book was all about American humor and satire and commentary. So it was academic work, but it was sourcing things like The Simpsons and South Park and all this. And he said, I need a cover that explains that, but he said, you can't use any of the proprietary stuff. So can't have Homer Simpson on there or anything. I'm like, well, how in the world, do I do that, have any of the characters? And Garrett, I guess I could email you the artwork I made, but
making a note, like I want to see this thing.
Yeah, I think it was called Art of the American Joke. I think it was at least part of the title. But anyway, so I felt like I could get away with using the Simpsons television, and what I ended up doing was doing like the NTSC color bars, kind of superimposed with an American flag on it. Mm-hmm. So you got kind of the cartoon aspect of it, also the television aspect, and then also sort of the sense of Americana. And anyway, I guess it worked. He accepted the project, but sometimes it's really difficult, when you have a lot of different parameters. So I mean, the parameters can be time, they can be budget, they can be just really weird restrictions you wouldn't think you'd have to work through. Sometimes it's like legal issues, like content you've got to get on there. Working at the bank, that was always a struggle because you'd come up with this like cool conceptual piece, and then you'd send it to the attorneys and say, okay, we've got to get half a page of small print on there. And you're like, but it's got to get on there. You're going to get audited and get in trouble. So yeah, I mean, as a designer, while I'm complaining about the parameters, sometimes the parameters are actually what allow for like the thought explosion, like you got to channel your thinking. I think that's probably why I'm not a true artist, is that as an artist, you can do anything you want, but I like the idea of working through a problem to communicate with design.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good info. I want to jump back and hear this final question from Destiny, if that's all right.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the end here, but also.
And then my third question would be, would you say that most of your students want to use their degree for advertising?
All right. Talk about that connection. What kinds of fields do your graphic design students go into?
Well, so not always the fields that they want to. So I always tell people, I mean, not to like dash any dreams, but I always tell people it's probably going to take 5 years coming out of school to get in the field that you want to be in. And part of that is when my students get so discouraged when they look at job postings, it says must have 3 years of prior experience. And they're like, whoa, how am I ever supposed to get the 3 years prior experience? Mm-hmm. And so they end up doing a job that maybe they're not like real psyched about. So they'll work like for a screen printer or an embroidery shop or something, making artwork. Sometimes they go work at Starbucks for a while. And what I always tell them, I say, keep working on your portfolio. Try to have a job while you're looking for a job. You don't just want to be strictly unemployed. But don't settle. just yet. Now, if you want to make a career out of Starbucks, that's great. I'm not saying to not do that. Probably shouldn't have mentioned any company by name. But anyway, they have great benefits from what I understand. But what I always tell people is like, don't settle in that job if that's not where you want to end up. Keep honing your skills, keep working your portfolio, and eventually you're going to get that call. You have to work your network, and most jobs are going to come that way. They're not going to be out of the blue. They're going to be through some kind of connection. My students end up working some for advertising agencies, small design firms, some freelance. Some of them go on to grad school. I have a couple of students that have gone to OU and gotten MFAs. A lot of them end up working for in-house design firms. I had a student that worked for a jewelry company doing design, product photography. I've got 2 students in New York, one in Washington, D.C. She's working for the Republicans now. I don't know if I should say that, but that's what she's doing. And it used to be that people tried to get like out of Oklahoma, but for whatever reason, like Oklahoma is perceived as being a little more hip now. So a lot of people like to stick around Oklahoma City, and there's some really good things happening in Oklahoma City and Tulsa both right now. And so yeah, agencies, in-house, a lot of them, and this is an OBU specific thing maybe, or Christian schools thing, they'll go work for churches as graphic designers, and they'll be on a communications team. And I mean, a lot of these larger churches, communication is so key to what they're doing, that they've realized the importance and value of graphic designers and getting that word out. So yeah, I'd say maybe half of them end up working for a church at some point. And so, yeah, that's a significant aspect of it too.
Excellent. This kind of catches us at opportune time, kind of looking ahead for students, tying it back to our prospects and your comments there. I hope once again we're seeing the crossover and the carryover, because that information is something we also encourage of the students and we definitely developed a capstone course specifically geared toward helping us process what's the reality of what comes next, what can I do to get ready for that, and be how patient do I need to be, to locate that. It's a reason we talk about passion early on in this course, because it's important for students to sort of learn how to identify that or cultivate it within where they're at, that they so that they have an ability to move beyond the circumstances they may find themselves in. Yeah, that's good stuff. Corey, thank you so much for joining us and for time out of your schedule to talk to our students, to tell them some of your stories, some of your experiences, and I know there's a lot to gain from it, and they'll be coming back through this whether they like it or not, right? Digging out these little nuggets. So maybe that's a lesson for them if you're just now finishing the video for the first time in passive audience mode. One of our educational goals in the major is to shift from passive audience mode to an active, critical agency through a number of ways. So you should have been taking notes, because now you'll have to rewatch it. So that's a great lesson learned for them. But thank you again for joining us. This is exciting. Hopefully we'll be able to opportunity to connect in the future. Is there anything we need to know about? Do you have anything to promote, anything to share upcoming that is a way we can kind of be on the lookout for your social media presence, your branding, or projects of that sort? Let's see. Okay, so personal plug. Now, don't put this stuff on the quiz, because I want them to be able to turn this off at this point if they want to. They're all clicking it off. So I'm doing an art show coming up on August 10th. So it's going to be a 10-year retrospective of my own work. Not all the work was done here at OBU, but freelance stuff, just personal projects and things. So I'll have that on display at the OBU Art Building. And then Garrett and I are actually collaborating on a journal. The journal's called Ink and Letters, and you can see it at inkandletters.com. It's actually a print journal. And so Garrett is a special guest editor for us, and the theme is the New West. And so we've been curating that, working through that all summer. And they've done the hard work, Garrett and a guy named Brent Newsom.
who's a colleague of mine. I've been doing the hard work on it, and now I need to get busy and do the layout. And that should be due out in fall. So hopefully around the first of school, you can pick up a copy of Ink and Letters. Well, thank you for the questions from the students. Those were great. So challenging stuff.
Excellent. All right. Well, everyone, this video should be archived. It'll be available on my YouTube page, where we put up a lot of video posts and lecture content and interviews and all kinds of information, educational in nature. So thanks again to Corey. And for you all, we'll be seeing you. You'll be hearing from me as we prepare for our week 2, or rather interview number 2. Thank you.